Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Hyperloop Talks. This is a podcast that the Canadian Hyperloop Conference is putting on just to feature some of the individuals in the Hyperloop industry as of today. So, today with me, I have Balvinder and Farah. They are both members of the Hyperlink team from the United Kingdom. So, I'm going to pass it off to them to give a little introduction about themselves.
Right. So, hi, I'm Balvinder Dhillon. I am a second year biomedical engineering student. I'm originally from Malaysia, but now I'm currently pursuing my degree in Queen Mary University of London.
Hi everyone, my name is Farah Ahmed. I'm from Egypt and I'm the biomedical team head for Hyperloop and I'm studying biomedical engineering. I'm currently in my placement year and I have one more year next year.
Great. Awesome. So, why did you guys choose to join the team?
So I first heard about it last year, about the Hyperloop team. I think it started last year. And I found it really interesting how like we can like mix a lot of like knowledge with like engineering, business, like medicine and like technology and all of that to kind of like make one thing that's actually very innovative and like it has to do like consider a lot of technology and I found it really interesting. And I'm also really interested in like the medical aspects with engineering and I feel like this team is like the perfect team because like I kind of can use like my medical knowledge alongside like the engineering knowledge I have to like make sure that patients not patients sorry to make sure like people are safe while they're like on we're traveling on the Hyperloop and stuff.
Cool.
So, I originally had heard of the Hyperloop idea in one of my magazines that I got at home. But when I came to Queen Mary, I wasn't aware that Hyperlink was a society until the day of the deadline itself. A message got sent around, and I was like, oh my God, they have a biomedical research team. This is going to be really good for my career. Let me just, apply. I had no expectations of getting in whatsoever. But eventually I did get in. And I just think it's very cool that we're actually the only team with a biomedical research division. So I think it's very cool that we are looking not only at inventing a really good Hyperloop pod prototype, we are also looking at how we could keep the people inside the pod themselves safe. So we're looking at a very holistic approach there, and that's something that I really, looked forward to before joining Hyperlink.
Yeah, for sure. That's funny that you applied on the last day and now you're the director. So
Even
that's
better,
very
I
cool.
I submitted my application an hour before the deadline.
Oh, wow. Look at that. Very cool. And so you both mentioned being part of the and excited about the biomedical research team specifically, which kind of perfectly transitions into the reason why I actually wanted to bring you guys on the podcast was to talk about your biomedical research paper that you guys have been working on for a while. So if you weren't able to attend the virtual showcase, Farah actually presented on the biomedical research paper at the virtual showcase. So we do have that video up on our YouTube channel. So I would recommend checking that video out if you haven't already. So let's jump right into talking about the research paper. So what inspired you guys initially to start this paper specifically?
Since I joined the team way before Farah, what we had looked at originally was a few ideas. And the thing with electromagnetism is that that's not something that's looked at even within like the medical field. That's something that's just people just pass through it. They don't really look at the effects of it. And when we realized that since the pod is going to run on electromagnetic levitation, it's going to need a lot of a lot of radiation for it to levitate. So we were just thinking like this is not going to be safe for the people in the pod with these amounts, especially if you're going to use the Hyperloop very frequently and for very long distances, that this must have some sort of effect on the person. So that's why we decided to venture a little bit more into the idea. And then once we did, we looked at more of like the clinical aspects. We looked at how MRIs work, CT scans work, and we saw that those had adverse effects on like humans and also other sorts of organisms like mice. So then from that, we kind of made a deduction that with the radiation being produced from the propulsion system, that it is going to affect the humans within the pod to an extent, depending on like the time of exposure and wavelengths. So that's the whole idea of it. We just really wanted to keep the people in the pod safe from electromagnetism.
That is very cool. And you know what? I think when people initially hear about Hyperloop and hear a brief overview of what it is, their first thought is, how the heck are we going to stay safe when we're going so fast? Everybody kind of focuses on the speed, and nobody really realizes how the propulsion system actually works, and that that could genuinely affect humans' health. So that is very cool that you guys have taken that and just gone with it and created a research paper. That's awesome. And it's really cool too to see students creating this much of an impact in the industry as well. So, in terms of your jumping off point, how did you guys start this process of research and writing?
So initially, we started our paper last year, and we looked at a lot of literature review because there's a lot of like testing going on about electromagnetism and like how it affects humans in general. So we kind of took that knowledge and tried to like apply it to Hyperloop because, as we all know, like it's still like a new system, and you can't really find a lot of things just about the Hyperloop. So we tried to look at like different like experiments and different studies about like different things, and like we kind of link that to how it affects humans. And like for example, you also looked at different organisms like Vavander mentioned, and we kind of like use that to like deepen our research and knowledge about how we can like kind of like correlate the two researches to like get information about our Hyperloop. So basically we looked at different like studies, different literature reviews.
Cool. So the first step was just to kind of learn as much as you can about the topic.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
And then was it just you two working on the paper, or did you have some others as well?
In the beginning, we actually had one hit, but then he left. So then after that, it was me, Farah, and two other girls, Lucia and Simha.
Cool. Wow, that's awesome. And so, what were your next steps after learning as much as you could on the topic?
I guess our next steps from there was just looking at the systems themselves, like we mainly focus on the linear induction motor because that was what our team was looking at.
Yeah.
So we mainly focus on that. We ran simulations based on that. We tried to use COMSOL, but we couldn't do it. So instead, we used CST Studio Suite. We watched a ton of YouTube videos to try and understand how to run these simulations. Eventually, we managed to do that. So we ran simulations and we kind of just like looked at the simulations and compared it to the literature review that we had. And then from that, we kind of just made a deduction like, okay, because the simulation showed that it's going to have this much radiation and this fits in with this sort of effects, how are we going to solve this? So the next step after that was just looking at the solution.
Wow, that's cool. That is, it's really amazing too that university students like yourself are being, or kind of making your own opportunities and really going forward with this research, because this is stuff that like the professionals would be tasked to do, right? So it's cool that
Yeah.
you guys are doing that as well. And then in terms of a solution to this problem, do you want to give a little overview to the viewers of what you guys came up with?
The solution we came up with was the first solution actually was to have a shield around the pod itself. So this was the pod and we would have a shield over that. Then we realized that that was not very feasible. So we decided to look at the main components that were producing this. So for us, since we looked at the propulsion system, the linear induction motor, we decided to put a shield over the linear induction motor, but it doesn't cover it fully. What it does is that it just covers it like that. So it can still levitate. It can still help the pod levitate. So we also so since we kind of decided that we needed to make a shield, we decided to look into more materials or what sort of materials that we would need to use to make the shield. And we found out that we could use ferromagnetic materials. So a few examples of that would be like aluminium, copper alloy 770, which we ended up taking. If I'm not mistaken, copper alloy 770 has a little bit of silver, zinc, and copper, but don't quote me on that. I'm not too sure about the silver part. I wrote this paper like 6 months ago, so I don't really remember much.
Yeah, you know, I wouldn't know if you're wrong or right. You're talking to the wrong person in terms of material, so I'll believe you.
Yeah, so then after that, we just finalized it to these three materials and then we ran simulations with it. And then from there, we saw like what actually happened to the electromagnetic radiation itself and how it got dissipated or how it was absorbed and everything. And then we found out that copper alloy 770 was the best material to be used. And then from there, we kind of just did a reverse study on it. So we found the best material now to find out why it's the best material and what sort of like concepts that come into play. So we did a little bit back research on that and we realized that it's very difficult to pronounce his name, Shulnikov's theory was the one that explained the whole thing, explained the whole mechanism of why copper alloy 770 was the best.
This year we're looking at like basically being cost effective, and in that way we're kind of looking at, because like we picked a copper alloy 770, and like Bavander mentioned, it's made of like three different materials. So now we're kind of looking at like using different percentages of each material, because like if I'm not mistaken, don't quote me on that as well, but I think zinc was the most expensive material out of like the three components within the copper alloy 770. So we're kind of looking at how we can like reduce the amount of zinc and increase, for example, the amount of other materials to make it a bit cheaper, but at the same time get the same effect that we would get with like the normal percentages. So in that way, we're more cost effective, because we also know like it's a very expensive like project and it's gonna need a lot of money. So like any cost saving would be like very beneficial. We're also looking more at like the time of exposure of like the radiation on humans, and like how to like make sure that like humans are exposed to like the right amount of like radiation and they're not like in danger or anything.
That's great. That's very, very cool. I know last year at Canadian Hyperloop Conference 2022, the Hyperlink linear induction motor was great. I believe they did win the linear induction motor award, or the propulsion award, I think it was called. Yeah, no, it was very cool. It was very different looking than all the other teams' limbs, and they had purple wire, like very thick purple wire, as opposed to like the really skinny stuff. And I remember Matthew was trying to get it all to fit like in the stator, and he was like jumping on it to get all the wires to fit in. It was very funny, but it worked. It was a very impressive limb. So yeah,
Good job, Matthew.
Yeah, I'm excited to see your guys' stuff this year for sure. It's gonna be great. So in terms of actually getting this paper published, how do you go about that? Like, who do you contact? Because I have no idea how you'd even go about that.
That is a very good question that I have been pestering people for, because I really want this paper to be published. Not only that, I also really want Hyperlink itself, because we do very exciting work. So as the president, I'm trying to get into contact with more of the senior executives. Like the other day, I had a meeting with them. And the best thing about Queen Mary is that we are very big on innovation. So they have this thing called QM innovation, and where these are the people that we speak to so that they can help us, like, take a look at our pod, probably suggest more companies for us. They can also help us like go through our papers, tell us what sort of like publications that we can approach to help publish our papers. So that's something that we are actually looking forward to, and someone that we are going to contact very soon once the electromagnetic paper is done and polished.
That's great. That's very cool. Yeah, because I'm thinking, how would students really have access to that? Like, you don't work for a scientific journal or anything like that, so it'd be maybe kind of a harder process for students to go through. Yeah, but one day we're going to be able to type in your name on Google Scholar and your paper is going to come up. So that's going to be very exciting. Yeah. Mhm. So, what are some of the barriers that you faced in your research or your research process, and how did you come over them?
Well, the first two barriers that I personally faced was like what Farah said, there's not much information on the Hyperloop. So what we had to do was make a bunch of connections. So it seems like the connections are correct, but at the same time, we are also getting it like reviewed by professionals to make sure that these concepts make sense and these connections make sense between just having the linear induction motor and looking at MRI, CT scans, and just other sort of electromagnetic materials, and electromagnetic effects. Another barrier that we faced was the lack of resources. So like I said, we didn't know how to use COMSOL, and that was because our university didn't have access to COMSOL, but it's been solved this year now. We all have access to COMSOL. So that's why we settled for a more subpar version of it. But yeah, so that was another barrier, is because we used a much less, like it didn't have as many tools that we needed it to have. And also so very difficult for us to learn how to use CST Studio Suite, because I remember Lucia, my partner at the time, and me just sitting down during our Thursday power hours for 3 hours watching YouTube videos of like
Yeah.
random people on the internet trying to explain to us how it works, and us just trying to duplicate how to do that. So that was something that was personally for what I struggled with the first few months of writing this paper.
Yeah, I think I would say the same thing. Is like a lot of the research and stuff we find is not like directly related to like the Hyperloop system, and we kind of need to make correlations. And like sometimes it's a bit difficult to like find the exact information you're looking for, and you need to like read a lot of papers, a lot of research, and sometimes it's not even related. Like you end up reading like 100 pages for in the end to like it doesn't make any sense to what you're looking for. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's a difficult process, but I think the stuff we like the outcomes we come out with is like beneficial. So.
for sure. No, definitely. So, what are actually some of the health effects that humans could face when exposed to electromagnetism?
It really depends on a lot of things actually come that's with electromagnetism. Last year, what we looked at mostly we focused on the frequency range, but I know this year there are many effects with electromagnetism. However, with electromagnetism itself, it's a very big topic, and you have a lot of things to look at. You've got to look at the time of exposure, the wavelength, the frequency. Last year, what we did was that we focused more on the frequency, and this year, I know Farah and her team are focusing more on like the time of exposure and also the wavelengths. An example would be if you were exposed to radio frequency for a certain period of time, you would have an increased parasympathetic nerve activity. And if you were to be within an intermediate frequency range between 0 hertz to 300 hertz, then you have elevated heart rate. So for the intermediate one, it it's very similar to how the frequencies that they have in like metal detectors, anti-theft devices in shops, but do keep in mind that these metal detectors and anti-theft devices, they are very small. So when you have something that's much larger, there's going to be more of it. And once you're exposed to it for a prolonged period of time, these effects can be a bit more aggravated than what we have stated.
Okay, good to know. So, those are the signs of if your body has been exposed to electromagnetism. So, beware. But hopefully, fingers crossed, that will not happen to us when riding a Hyperloop. Because of the Hyperlink research paper, we are all saved. So that is very good. That's awesome, guys. So how was working with the team? Like, I want to know, did anybody have like a specific role that they were assigned in regards to this paper, or did you all just kind of free for all? We're gonna just try and learn as much as we can and do what we can to help each other.
Right, so there's actually a funny story behind this.
Yeah.
I remember having two papers. So it was the seating paper and this electromagnetism paper. And when Farah and the new person came in, what I had in mind at the time I was the head of biomedical research was to split it. So one person does electromagnetics, another person does seating. So I let them decide themselves. And no one wanted to do seating. Both of them wanted to do electromagnetism. And my partner at the time, Lucia, also wanted to do electromagnetism. So I was like, no, we cannot do that. So
Yeah.
what we did was that we allocated task every week. So we run in sprints. So every week we
Okay.
set task, and I will give them tasks for both papers, electromagnetism and also seating, so that there's a balance and one paper is not favored more than the other.
Yeah, that's true. Even though I guess it kind of was in their heads, it was more favored. Well, I guess am I correct in saying that there's probably a lot more to electromagnetism as opposed to seating? Because when I think about seating, I'm like, oh, there's a seat, and I sit in it. That's it. But I'm sure there's much more.
With like seating, I know it seems like oh it's just a seat, but
Yeah.
then you also need to consider like how your body's gonna like sit and how your bones are gonna be like laid out, how they're gonna be
Ergonomics.
comfortable. Yeah, the stresses that are gonna be applied, and also the material, how the material is gonna react with your body, how it's gonna react with like any like radiation inside the pod, all of that. So it's like a lot of things to consider. And I feel like with that paper, it was a bit easier to research because like a lot of like the sports cars and stuff, they
Yeah.
already looked at like the ergonomics factors of their seating. So there's a lot of like stuff we could like reference and like look at and like get ideas from. But I wouldn't say like I wouldn't say it's like less important than the like the electromagnetic one. But it's like I guess like there's not a lot to talk about like the electromagnetic one, but it's like I think very important because like in the end of the day, if we're not seated properly, we could
For
be
sure.
injured like severely. So
You're gonna get from point A to point B very quickly, but you're gonna have back issues. So
yeah, exactly.
we
We
can't
don't
have
want to
that.
have that.
Yeah. Okay, well that's great. So I'm really glad to see too that you guys are working on more research papers as well, not just the electromagnetism one. Do you have any other ideas past electromagnetism and the seeding?
So we're currently working on a vacuum paper, and we're looking at
Cool.
how, if God forbid the pod like breaks or something, how would that like because how we're gonna travel in vacuum, how what effects would that have on the humans, and how to make sure like if this happens, we have like enough time to like make sure all the like passengers are safe and all that. But yeah, that one is really interesting. But I think it's also like one of those papers where you don't have a lot of like resources. But
Yeah,
yeah,
no, it's yeah, for sure. That is like a big roadblock that I've heard many teams talk about, especially in the area of linear induction motors. So
yeah.
I know a lot of teams have been heavily relying on professors for a lot of help because the internet is of no help. But one day, hopefully, it will be soon.
Actually,
Hopefully.
with this, this chat GPT open AI thing, that's very helpful. I know my
Oh,
engineering team,
really?
yeah, I don't know, 2 o'clock in the morning, someone would send, hey, I talked to this AI and this is what they said. And I'll have a
What? Oh
yes,
my
whole
goodness.
discussion of it, and I'll wake up to like 70 messages.
What?
Two
Wait, so
o'clock
they
in the
just
morning.
type questions about the linear induction motor to the AI, and the AI, man, what's this thing called again?
I'm surprised you don't know about it. It's called
Oh,
it's from America, I think. It's called Chat GPT Open AI.
open AI. Oh my goodness. That's scary. Robots are going to take over the world one day. That is. But very helpful to us. So we'll take it. Yeah, that's great. That's super cool. So then in terms of like finishing up this paper, it sounds like you were still doing some work on it. What's your timeline like? When are you planning on being done by?
So, like I mentioned before, we're currently working on three papers. So, for the electromagnetism one, we just need to do the simulations on console, and then after that, we're basically done because
Great.
we did like most of it from last year. So, I would say like by the end of next month, it should be done.
Oh wow. Okay. Very soon. So we can read
And
it. Woo.
and the seating paper, we still have a bit of research to do on that one, but most of the research is mostly done, and we have a bit of simulation to do to like look at the stresses and stuff like I mentioned before. I would say that would be like 2 months from now, 3 months from now. And the vacuum one is like the one that we're doing from scratch, so that one needs like a bit
Yeah,
of
it'll take a long
time.
time, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's so much to cover with that topic.
yeah,
Well, that's
exactly.
great. That's very exciting. I hope to see a lot more papers from other Hyperloop teams in the future as well. Yeah, because I think too the Hyperloop industry still is so new that despite us being students, we can actually still contribute a lot and really make a difference in the industry. So that's great. Yeah. So I want to switch gears a little bit. I heard that Hyperlink was the recipient of the Bright Network Innovation Award. So congratulations to you guys. And I just wanted to hear a little bit more about that award and what it is.
The Innovation Award is an award that's given out to a lot of like societies throughout the UK by Bright Network, which is Bright Network in itself is a non-profit organization that helps students with their careers, connecting them with a bunch of companies like Amazon, Google, Visa. The Innovation Award actually is sponsored by Visa. So the award itself, it looks at how students kind of just take their education up to a next level. Like, what do we do with the opportunities we get in university? What do we do with the education that we have? So this award actually can go from, there's a variety towards it. There's a variety of approaches towards it. I know there was another society called the Legal Tech Society. So what they look at is more of like the legality of like using AI and everything. So that's pretty impressive. And then you've got the Rocketry Society that's building a rocket, and then you've got us. So I guess in essence, what the Innovation Award is it's what Hyperlink is. It's what we do. We innovate and we produce new things. The how I found out to apply to this innovation award was because someone, to be honest, I don't really know who this someone was. I had one brief conversation with him about Hyperlink, where he congratulated me on being president. And after he was like, "Oh, look, this is the innovation award by Bright Network. You should totally apply for it." At first, I was like, okay, fine, I'll just tell it to my team. And then I did. And we did what we needed to do because
Yeah,
another award under your belt, that sounds nice, right?
that's good.
Yeah.
And
So,
if
and
I'm
then,
not mistaken, this award did come with some money as well, did
oh,
it?
yes. Yes,
Yes.
it did. So this award in itself came with £900. Because we won this award, we are also finalist for the Society of the Year award, which we will
Cool.
find out at a gala dinner next in January next year.
Wow, well, that's a really big accomplishment for you guys. That's super cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, and to end off, I want to hear from both of you what your opinions of the current Hyperloop industry are and where you see it going.
Honestly, like looking back, like 30 years from now. Like I used to like when I was talking, for example, with my dad, he was like, yeah, I remember when I was a kid, I also used to hear about like Hyperloop and all of that. So like it's kind of like something that like started from like such a long time ago. And as we like go forward, I feel like we're like researching more. Get like for example, if I compare it now with like 20 years ago, it's not the same. Like we've developed a lot, we've learned a lot of things, we considered a lot of like new aspects. So I would say it would be going somewhere. When I have no idea.
Yes.
But yeah, it's like I think like because I feel like every single like century or everything and like every single like time period we have a lot of like new technologies. Like for example, if you compare now with like a while ago, it's not the same. Like we learn new things, we get new technologies, all of that, which all can help us like research and develop Hyperloop and can actually make it happen one day, hopefully.
Yeah. Cool.
So I guess my sentiment is the same as Farah, because if you look long ago, like you wouldn't think CRISPR, the gene editing tool, would be it would just be something of science fiction. It wouldn't actually come to life. So I think that's the same thing with the Hyperloop itself, because I remember my dad actually found a magazine, a very old magazine from 2013 that was sitting in the back of my home. And back then it was just an idea, and now we have all of these competitions, all of these companies working towards it. So I think it is a very probable and feasible idea. Personally, I would hope it comes true, because I don't want to fly 16 hours from Malaysia to London. I
Yeah.
would rather take that and just come here really fast. But in terms of timeline, I feel like the technology in itself is there, but it's more toward the economic feasibility that's a bit of a problem. I hope that it becomes a reality within the next 10 to 15 years, but that also really depends on like the economic state of the world and stuff.
Yeah, it all comes down to the really expensive price tag of the Hyperloop. I think a lot of student teams also face the same trouble where funding is really what's stopping us.
Yeah.
Because you have a lot of individuals on your team who are very talented and would be able to make the technology happen at a student level, but it's hard when it comes to funding for sure.
Yeah.
That's great. I also like the point Farah made about history and how people who don't know much about it may think that Hyperloop is this brand new idea that has popped up that was created by Elon Musk in 2013, but really his idea was just an iteration of past ideas that have been coming and improving since like when transportation started. So it's very cool to see how our transportation has evolved, and hopefully will keep evolving, because I always say humans will not stop innovating until we are able to teleport. And even if we can teleport, they're probably going to try and figure out how to teleport faster. So the innovation won't stop. All right, cool. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on the podcast, The Return of Hyperloop Talks. I'm glad you guys were the first ones back, and I'm very excited for everybody else to see this.
Right.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much
so
for
much for
having me.
having us.
All right, bye guys.
Bye.